Hi, I'm Dr. Mark Pettis, the medical director of Essential Provisions, a high quality whole food nutrition company that makes meals ready to eat and sports nutrition blends for greater performance and resilience and just nutrient dense fuel for the warrior in each of us. And the Mightiest Warriors podcast is an informal conversation with remarkable people who've transformed challenges in their lives into careers of service, of leadership. And I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to be talking with Major Allison Brager. And I'm just going to introduce Allison from some information I've picked up. Allison is a neurobiologist with expertise in sleep and circadian rhythms, and she works for the United States Army. She's active duty and has done a tremendous amount of research in this area with emphasis on resiliency to extreme environmental stress, sleep deprivation, all the things that we know are just critical in day-to-day health and performance. She's had many leadership positions in the federal government and university departments and has done active consulting and education for the U.S. Army, for Department of Defense, NASA, the NIH. It's a long and impressive list, and I'm really delighted, Allison, to have an opportunity to chat with you. And I should say, Allison got her PhD at Kent State University, a doctor in physiology, and did her undergraduate work at Brown University, not far from where I was born in Providence, Rhode Island. Maybe a conversation for a different time, Allison. But when I was in high school, this is back in the early 70s, where there wasn't a whole lot to do, certainly no internet. I would go with my buddies to the Brown University bookstore. That was where you could meet really interesting and mature, right, young women and men and
Hey, I get it. You know what? That's a great spot to hunt.
no questions. So anyhow, welcome to the Mightiest Warriors, Allison.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure to be on. It's funny. I feel like I had the same tactic in college too, in order to meet people during my single life. So that's awesome.
Yeah. You're currently at Fort Knox in Kentucky,
Uh,
is that right?
so I'm at Fort Bragg,
Fort Bragg.
and I'm getting ready to move to teach at West Point here soon.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. It sounds like you've been very active. And what are some of the things that you'll be teaching at West Point?
So I'll be teaching this course that every cadet has to take. It's called the Psychology of Leadership. Actually, I'm super excited about teaching it because it means I basically will get to teach every cadet that will walk through that place over the next 3 years. And then, serve as a mentor for some of the more upper level courses related to neuroscience. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to getting back into the classroom full time.
Yeah, that's great. And in my experience teaching, it really it keeps you fresh. And I can only imagine that your military service uh, informs a lot of what you're able to share in a way that's very practical and applicable. And so, yeah, that's an awesome opportunity.
Yep, no, I'm looking forward to it. It's been part of my career goal, career path, so I'm happy to make it happen.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about just growing up, your background, Allison. What did you have military in your family, or what sort of got you on that path?
So actually, I mean, like everyone's grandfather, my grandfathers both served in World War II. my mom's grandfather, he was part of the infamous Army Air Corps. So that, show Masters of the Air. He was one of the mechanics for, the early days of the Army Aviation Corps. But really, it was 9/11. So most of my mom's family's from outside New York City. So kind of, if you grew up in the Northeast, you had that call to action to join the military. I actually was getting recruited at the time by West Point. But my parents really wouldn't let me go to West Point. So I sort of like always had that call for selfless service, ended up going to the antithesis of West Point, not in spite of them. It just culturally, I just felt like I really identified with the teaching philosophies and way of life of Brown University, and still had that call to service after my time at Brown. And then probably like 10 years later, when I was doing my fellowship, I ended up at the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research, attached to Walter Reed National Medical Hospital in DC. And my first day there, the department chair asked me if I wanted to join. And I was like, well, I'm 33, I'm a neuroscientist. Like, what would I actually do? And it turns out the Army has a small but mighty group of neuroscientists known as the 71 Foxes. And so ended up commissioning within 6 months.
The 71 Foxes. These are
Yeah.
these are neuroscientists in the U.S. that do research and work directly for the military.
Yeah, so they're uniformed neuroscientists. I don't know what the equivalent is for the Navy, but there are 20 some of us from captain to colonel. Not all of us are neuroscientists. So technically they're research psychologists. I don't really identify as a research psychologist. I don't really have any formal training in psychology, but I would say about 6 or 7 of us have like formal training as neuroscientists. And so we tend to focus more on things like, unmanned systems, drone operations, inclusion of human performance within the military portfolios, like more biomarker studies, so more like biomedical aspects of military warfare planning and operations.
Hmm. Fascinating. So did you as you were doing your neuroscience training at Kent State, in the back of your mind, was that ever something you thought you would end up doing, or did this seem to come about in a somewhat unexpected way?
Definitely unexpected. I thought I was going to be the path and like follow in my mentor's footsteps, most like most people who are getting their PhD. I thought, well, be a professor. I mean, I enjoy teaching. I enjoy being in the classroom. But I kind of realized during my fellowship years, my first fellowship at Morehouse School of Medicine in Atlanta, Georgia, when I went on the job market for permanent faculty positions, that I didn't really identify and fit in within the culture of academia. Um, I was often seen as like a dumb jock meathead, which sort of again inspired me to write that book, Meathead. People really didn't take me seriously because I lived a different lifestyle than them. Like I still was an elite athlete. I mean, I was trying to make an Olympic team when I was in grad school. After grad school, I found CrossFit and I competed as a professional in the CrossFit games while doing my fellowship and serving as research faculty. And so, I was looking for a different culture and a different community that more or less aligned with my values. And that really wasn't academia. But when I started working for the military, I realized like I found my people, people who love to do hard things, push themselves physically and mentally daily, and had a lot of the same values that were instilled upon me growing up in a working class blue collar city right outside of Kent State in Northeast Ohio.
Well, so as a an elite athlete training for the Olympics, and balancing that with sort of fellowship graduate studies, and that the level of focus and dedication, just had to be over the top. Allison, how did you balance that? That's a lot of challenge with respect to development and allocation of time and resting and how did you juggle all of that?
Well, if you think about it, I wasn't actually successful because I realized you couldn't get a PhD in neuroscience and try to qualify for the Olympic trials at the same time. But you know, I'm happy I gave it a shot. I went to grad school not because of the program. I went to Kent State not because of the program in neuroscience. I went there because one of the best pole vault coaches at the time was at Kent State and also University of Akron, Dennis Mitchell, who has gone on to coach a lot of Olympians. And yeah, I mean, it was a learning lesson for me. I was so in high school, I was one of the first female pole vaulters in the state of Ohio. That was later in high school. So really, college was my first dedicated time to compete in the pole vault. And I, kept doing better year after year. Competitive, the Ivy League was pretty competitive with track and field at the time. And I was like, why not? Let me give it a shot. And, I never really improved. But I don't regret anything. I just know that if you want to do something really well and you want to be an expert, it taught me a lesson that like you can only be an expert in one thing at a time. Like there's a reason why you stay in your lane. Because you can't do multiple things well once. I think that's like a famous Bruce Lee quote. I fear the man not that has 10,000 kicks that he's done one time, but the man who has done one kick 10,000 times.
Love that. And it's so true. Yeah, I think as though most people haven't embraced particular goals and performance at with the depth that perhaps you have in areas of your life, Allison. But I think uh, anyone who's on an intense sort of professional journey, but also trying to cultivate or develop an assertive self-care or competitive performance mindset can appreciate just how difficult it is to really excel at that two standard deviations from the mean level in multiple things, sort of simultaneously.
Yep.
But you have reading your resume and a lot of your accomplishments, you've the impression is that you've really come upon this sort of triad, military service, um, research and application of that research, and certainly what I would imagine in your own personal life and self-care. It feels very congruent and integrated, and that has to be a really nice place to be, both personally and professionally.
Yeah, it definitely is. So I mean, I think that's what it is being in the military is like I found my people. I don't want to say like I still live like as a college athlete, but I think back to my time as a college athlete. And that was truly like the best 4 years of my life. Like I got to travel the world. I mean, we traveled to California. We went down to Florida, competed against the best of the best in track and field. We used to do a trip to England to compete against Oxford and Cambridge. So like I was always just with my teammates. Like I ate with my teammates, I trained with my teammates, I traveled with my teammates. And just feel like being in the military is just like being on a sports team. It really is. It's like being on a collegiate sports team. And, if that's the identity I will continue to live in life, it is what it is. But, that's the identity that I embrace and, what fuels my passion each and every day.
Yeah, that very much resonates, Allison, with the conversation I had in my last interview with Captain Casey Harver, who um, was also at Winter Strong, a Navy SEAL who lives in Kodiak, Alaska, and has he does wilderness survival skill training, both for the military as well as for any individual who likes those more challenging wilderness excursions, as well as taking people on tours. And he was commenting on how it very much felt like the life of an athlete, that interpersonal connection and that sort of team mindset, sort of the shared brain, uh, and
Yep.
then that drive to find that edge where you can um, realize realize the experience, realize the output, whether it's a pole vault or shooting a gun at a very high level consistently. Making that analogy to sort of that professional athlete and functioning on a high level as a default, and and of course the importance of self-care uh, as a way of enabling resilience given the challenges of that mindset.
Yeah, no, that's that there's so many parallels. Like especially where I work now for special forces, like, I remind myself that every day it's like being under assessment and selection. Like just like in college, I always wanted to be on the varsity squad, right? I wanted to compete in every meet. I wanted to compete in conference. I wanted to compete beyond. And that requires dedicated, focused discipline and effort each and every day. Like you can have bad days, but as long as you still show effort and care and concern for you and others, like it all works out. And that's what I love. I feel like my job allows me to be a better person and to learn a lesson each and every day.
Fantastic. I would think um, in my professional work, Allison, largely uh, looking at the science of lifestyle, which would certainly include sleep quality and circadian rhythms. Very much, I'm kind of an amateur neurobiologist and find um, emerging trends in biology really fascinating. I think biology. There isn't a textbook today that probably isn't outdated, given the explosion of knowledge. Uh, and when I look at topics, clinical topics like neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, ALS, and look at where a lot of that research is going, which is um, uh, not so much genetic. There's obviously a lot of emphasis on the genetics of those in those examples, but really on how lifestyle influences one's metabolic uh, landscape, and how
Yep.
that ultimately can take a challenged brain, whether that might be a traumatic brain event or PTSD, just from the emotional trauma, and or whether it might be just the day-to-day challenges of maintaining that professional athlete like focus and performance while experiencing a wide array of environmental conditions. And so I can only imagine, I guess, where I'm going with this, that the research as it relates to the military, many of the challenges that are seen, and the desire to create effective treatment, rehabilitation, mitigation, risk mitigation, et cetera, has to be a really active area right now for people with your expertise.
No, it totally is. And I think what's really nice about where I work is I work with individuals, at least in the special forces community, who are at the beginning or the tail end of their career. Either we're trying to instill these lifestyle cultural habits that, quite honestly, the generation before them got completely wrong, right? So sort of like the generation before the new generation was the medicine 1.0 approach, to use like the Peter Attia analogy,
Yes.
whereas this generation is very much ingrained in the medicine 2.0 approach. But then also, like, I work with individuals who, through the use of wearables and being more self-aware of their eating habits and their sleep and how much they train and when they train, are able to have a transformation to go from medicine 1.0 to medicine 2.0. And as like my sergeant major always says, and I love that he says this, is like, we are trying to return America's heroes back into society to be role models uh, and figures, rather than, your drunk uncle who talks about his days in the war.
Mm.
Because I think that that's so true. It's like lifestyle really, it not just has an impact on your psychological health, but it, we know through epigenetic regulation and other modifiable biological factors, has a huge impact on your physiological health.
Absolutely. And the realization that the brain is true of the human body in general. But, I was taught, a generation ago that, the brain was this sort of fixed biomass that peaked at a young age and then had this inexorable decline. And, um, you know, so pray that no bombs drop later in life and that you can be active up until which time, you transition. And now the understanding that the brain is so malleable, so plastic, so adaptive, as you were saying, epigenetics, the science of how our book of life can rewrite itself in response to changes in our environment, is a very liberating, I think, sort of understanding. And I find the hope there is that many of the things historically that we thought were fixed or inevitably progressive have probably far more possibilities than what historically we would have ever imagined. And that to me is very exciting about where we're at now, whether it's nutrition and how nutrition influences every aspect of health and performance and metabolic resiliency, or whether it's other aspects of a soldier's mindset, lifestyle, et cetera, and how it helps prepare them not just for the challenges that they confront, but recovering from the challenges they confront. And that it's a much more interesting story now as a clinician, as a biologist. Um, I've come to appreciate that most of what I was taught a generation ago has turned out not to be true. And I think this human potential is and possibility is far greater than what certainly the Western medical enterprise has given it credit for.
Nope, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think, nutrition and exercise, like, it's validation for people who, and that's sort of the underlying thesis of my popular science book, Meathead, is like, it's validation for people who have exercised their whole life, either as a competitive athlete or as someone who understands like the benefits for mood, energy, mental health. But it also for those who, put in the work and make a transformational lifestyle change and see the powers of exercise, not just on physical health, but more importantly, mental health. there's no turning back. And there's so much documented evidence in terms of exercise reducing, overall morbidity and mortality across the board, in my opinion.
Yeah, no question. As we sort of bring this home, Allison, when you're going to be at West Point very soon, um, when you're able to give advice, whether that's related to the neuroscience you do, or whether it's just someone who's had lots of experiences, who's had elite athletic sort of training and experiences, what are sort of the pearls that you emphasize, that you pass along to some of these young adults who, you know, I would think are the credibility and the ability to influence behavioral change is much more likely to be the case when it's coming from a respected member of the tribe, as I'm sure they perceive you to be. What are some of the words of wisdom that you typically pass along?
It's funny you say that. I think the one that sticks out the most, I actually Colonel Drew Morgan, NASA astronaut, he told me this when I was going under assessment and selection with NASA. And this is before I got to the Special Warfare Center in school. And I realized it's the whole basis of what we're looking for in a Green Beret and a special operator. And it's be a good dude, right? Like man or woman, like dude, using like, not assigning it to any gender, but be a good dude. And what that means is you are an honest, hardworking, contributing member of society, and you're humble about what you do. So, that's, I think, one of the greatest gifts I have been blessed with working in the special operations community is I worked with America's heroes, and they have done heroic things of valor and courage that many Americans would never, anyone in the world would be unwilling to do. But no one talks about it, right? Like they don't use that. They know that like those events in life shape them, but they don't use that to get ahead in life, right? It's just a part of who they are. But they just go out there and they teach, train, coach, mentor others, and are humble about how they do it. And I think that's the most important pearl is to like be a good dude.
Hmm.
Um, the other thing I talked about is right, stay in your lane is like we all are experts in this world. And it's important to listen to other experts, right? Like, um, I, I am not an expert in maintenance or nor do I tout to be, even though I was a company commander of a trucking fleet as part of my time as a company commander. When I did that role, like I sought out the experts who were the experts in truck maintenance and repair. And we ended up, creating a great culture and increased morale in that company because we each stayed in our lane and catered to our strengths and attributes. Um, and then, similar in a similar vein to those two is I always love the quote, like, check your ego at the door. What I mean by that is you don't want to have like biased, preconceived premonitions about someone. You want to like accept them for who they are and not pass any judgment. And um, right, just be humble about what you do and be grateful that you get to do the things you do. Um, each and every day.
Love that, Allison. Be a good dude. Leave your ego at the door. And yeah, the humility. With medical students, residents, I often refer to this notion of the humility to ego ratio. And the great wise healers understand that the more they know, the more they realize they don't know. And
Yep. The
their
more you learn,
humility,
the less you know.
exactly, and their humility grows with that. or should grow with that, and their ego should require much less to be satisfied. And that, I think, as everyone knows, in the medical enterprise is not necessarily uh, the rule, but certainly those have been the lessons for me in my life, and they resonate more today than they ever have. And you're very generous with your time. I know you're really busy right now, Allison, and this generosity of spirit comes across quite loud and clear, and all that you've done to serve our country, to serve our the participants in the armed forces, all you do to advance our learning and understanding of the brain and how it impacts our lives. Very grateful for that, Allison. And you are a one of the mightiest warriors. And
Oh, well, thank you.
thank you for serving us with your time and energy. And I should note that the reason we can't see Allison's beautiful face is she is in a secure facility where the video recording was not an option. So, Allison,
Oh,
and I just want to thank you for that. And something tells me our paths will cross in the future. I do hope that's the case.
yeah. I mean, if I see some of your friends and teammates out at Summer Strong, that's where I'm headed after this interview. I definitely look forward to getting back into a community that, Bert Soren, I think, has created and forged, when we crossed paths at Winter Strong back in February.
Amazing energy. Yeah, well, enjoy that, Allison, and I'll remind the team from Essential Provisions that you'll be there. So safe travels to you, and keep shining your light.
Well, thank you so much. And yeah, thank you for your patience with me and my work day. I always feel bad when I'm late for things, but just, that's how the operational tempo works around here.
Yeah, you got to, when the cosmos gives you feedback, you got to roll with it. So
Yep.
beautiful.